I'm Thurston County Commissioner Tye Menser, and today I'm having coffee with Bob Barnes, a retired landscape architect for the Washington State Department of Transportation, and Thurston County's very own resident tree planter and advocate. Bob and I first got to know one another through tree planting events at the McLean Elementary School, which teach the importance of caring for the environment in areas right around the kids' school. Those events are always fun and inspiring. Welcome, Bob, and thanks for taking the time to talk with me today.
It's a pleasure to be here, and it's all about the kids. They are the 100% the future. So we need to get them involved early and often. And over the years, I've planted hundreds, maybe thousands of trees with McLean kids, many thousands of daffodils with the kids. And it puts
right along the Evergreen Parkway, right?
Yeah, and it puts a smile on your face every time you see them. It's a great thing to do.
Awesome. This week we celebrate the 51st annual Earth Day, a day I know you and I both feel strongly about. Why is Earth Day important to you, and how has it evolved over the years?
Earth Day is important to me because it allows us to give back and provide some caring for the planet, and this planet needs a lot of caring. We've done a lot of damage to the planet over the years, and we all need to work together collectively. And particularly, that's why it's so important to get the kids involved, because they are going to be 100% the future. And we need to get the kids involved. We need to get their parents involved. We need to get their grandparents involved. All of us need to work together to make this world a better place.
As a longtime resident of Thurston County, and an environmental advocate, do you have any tips for people who want to make a difference on Earth Day or other days in their daily lives to help the planet?
Right. Well, use less water. That's a really important thing, because water is a finite resource. And I know the Women's League.
League of Women Voters.
Yeah, they did a really good session on water and the importance of water, and the fact that we only have a limited supply of water. It's a finite supply. So use water judiciously. Be really careful with it, and then use compost. Compost is such an important ingredient. It's like magic. When you use compost, you're taking that material out of the waste stream, so that material's not going into a landfill, and it's creating something useful. And that material helps to provide nutrients and moisture for plant material, like this tree here. This is a Western red cedar. We call it the tree of life because it provides everything for the Native American tribes here in Western Washington. It provided everything from housing, from their houses, to their transportation, canoes, to their clothing. It provided so much. And so that's a wonderful tree. It's called Thuya plicata, Western red cedar.
Your favorite?
My favorite tree.
Okay, very good. All right. So I want to talk about climate change for a minute. Mm-hmm. I received some artwork from students that had gotten together climate clubs around the different county schools. Right. They wrote letters to the elected officials on the back and created butterflies on the front. And there was one in particular that I had posted up on my wall for the entirety of the last 2 years as the county built up toward adopting the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. Right. As I could see it as a clear reminder of why we need to take immediate action to try to help stem climate change.
Right.
Have you seen examples of climate change during your 40+ years of work in environmental arena in Thurston County?
Definitely. You can certainly see the invasion of undesirables such as Scotch broom, blackberries, knotweed. There's a lot of weeds that have really started to populate, particularly because we've lost forest cover, which provides competition. So you're seeing a lot of encroachment of undesirables like those that I just mentioned. And just the loss of forest cover overall. We're losing that forest provides basically a rain catcher. It's like a rain catcher. So it grabs that water, allows it to slowly get into the ground. Once you remove all that cover, you've lost that ability, and you've also lost the carbon storage that trees provide. So you got two things going. You have less water, and you have less carbon storage. So by removing those trees, there's a lot of impact. And I see a lot of loss of forest cover. And that's why another reason why it's so important to use compost, because compost helps to absorb that water. It also is a carbon sink. So
composting and conserving water.
Right.
Back to your two Bob's tips for helping the planet.
Exactly.
So I learned a fancy word in my work on climate over the last 2 years: sequestration.
Right.
Is that? I think it kind of relates to what you were just talking about.
That's absorbing that carbon. Exactly. Sequestering it, tying it up. And
so planting trees can help mitigate that?
Definitely. And some trees are better than others at sequestering. We're planting a couple of new tree types here the last few years, coastal redwoods and giant sequoias. Those trees are incredibly efficient at absorbing carbon. And one of the reasons they're so good at it is because of their lifespan. Coastal redwood or a giant sequoia can live up to 3,000 years, which is mind-boggling.
Amazing.
That's hard to believe. And they get so huge. They just get immense. And so we're starting to plant those trees, coastal redwoods and giant sequoias, here in the Puget Sound area, kind of assisted migration. So introducing those trees that normally resided in California, but now because of climate change, the climate is shifting north. It's getting warmer to the northern latitudes. And so both the coastal redwoods and the giant sequoias, I think, are going to do very well here. They were here 10,000 years ago, the giant sequoias. Coastal redwoods, not so much, but I think they're both going to be very appropriate. And we were able to get a grant through the DNR to plant both the coastal redwoods and the giant sequoias on the Evergreen Parkway.
DNR is Department of Natural Resources, a state agency.
Exactly. And so that was part of their community and urban forestry grant program, and we were able to successfully get a grant, and we're going to be introducing those trees, and anybody that wants to help out can help this fall, because we'll be planting some trees, and we're going to get the children from, students from McLean, but anybody in the neighborhood that wants to participate, we're happy to. Many hands make light work.
I've also learned, similar to that forests that have a diverse types of trees is a much more resilient and healthy forest than forests where you, for example, if you clear cut and just planted one type of tree.
You bet. Yeah, it's best to have diversity. And unfortunately, we're losing some of our trees along the Evergreen Parkway, particularly the Douglas fir, because it's too wet. So they tend to get laminated root rot is a condition that affects particularly the Douglas fir. And so we're introducing more of the western red, the tree of life, the coastal redwoods, and the giant sequoias to help provide more diversity.
Tying up this discussion on climate change, Bob, what do you think local governments can do to help mitigate the effects of climate change?
Well, I think certainly planting more trees is one thing. Just restoring land is really important. And I know the county has had a great program with the REAP program.
Real estate excise tax, one of our
Right.
tax programs. Yeah.
And so one of the things that you guys are doing is eliminating salmon barriers. And that's really important to me because I'm on the board of the South Puget Sound Salmon Enhancement Group. And barriers to salmon reproduction is one of the biggest impediments to getting our salmon to thrive. And so the REAP program has really been instrumental in helping to eliminate those barriers, replace culverts, blocking culverts with bridges or better culverts.
So fish can access the habitat upstream.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and the other thing that we need to do is do a better job of restoring the riparian buffer along our streams, our creeks, as well as our rivers, and providing more wetland habitat, because when we fill in the wetland, there's no shock absorber in that system anymore. So things like sediment that's in the stream doesn't have any place to go. So where does it end up? Down in Puget Sound. So it has to be dredged continually. So we need to do a better job of restoring the wetlands and planting the riparian buffers, which will help to cool the water, which is really important for salmon.
Temperature is very important. I
Yeah.
learned about that. You mentioned Evergreen Parkway a few times, and we have the Ralph Monroe Trail there. And in fact, there's a special part on the Ralph Monroe Trail called the Barnes Bog.
Right.
And you're the only person I know that has a bog named after them in Wilson County. So can you tell us how that came about, how you got involved?
Sure. Well, Ralph's a great guy. He was our Secretary of State from 1980 through 2000. So 20 years he was our Secretary of State, longest Secretary of State in Washington's history. He lives in the area, and his son went to McLean Elementary School, so that's why he has a strong connection with McLean. We started working together in the 90s, the mid-90s, and we planted trees along that stretch from Mud Bay Road up to the college. Over 60,000 trees were planted with McLean kids, which is an astounding number. But we ran out of places to plant all the trees, and so we started planting daffodils. But one of the things that Ralph noticed was he noticed the Capitol High School girls cross-country team running through the forest. And he goes, well, that's pretty crazy. Maybe we should put in a trail. So he had a logger friend, Dave Pearsall, who was just a great guy. Dave's planted millions of trees in Western Washington. And so Dave got together with his logging friends, and they blazed a trail with a cat just to create a place where these kids could run. And then that evolved into a trail, which we applied for a grant through Thurston Regional Planning Council, TRPC, and they provided the funding, and we used some funding from DOT. I worked for DOT. I was a landscape architect for 33 years, and DOT provided some of the funding as a match, because whenever you have a grant, you have to have a match.
Right.
So we were able to actually pave that trail from the elementary school, McLean, all the way up to the college. And boy, that trail is used extensively.
Absolutely.
But that's just a piece of the Capitol to Capitol Trail. And Ralph's vision is to have a trail that goes from the Capitol campus to the Capitol Forest, which is amazing. And a piece of that is going to be implemented next year. It's in the design phase right now, but it goes through Grass Lakes Park.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a 170-acre park, which is just in a great place to see wildlife and to connect with nature.
But how did we end up with Barnes Bog?
So Barnes Bog ended up, Ralph always likes to kind of, personalize individual areas. So some of the teachers from McLean have areas that are named after them. Barb Burkholtz, Burkholtz Bayou, and Judy Porter, Porter Pond, and Shilter Slough, Mrs. Shilter. And then Dave Pearsall has his Pearsall Pond. And then I got a bog. And when South Puget Sound Salmon Enhancement Group worked together with the Capital Land Trust to restore an area down at Allison Springs, where there's a beautiful salmon return. The chum salmon come back every fall, right around Christmas time. And when they were doing that restoration, they uncovered a number of newts, rough-skinned newts, which are real slow moving reptilian
Creatures.
creatures, yeah. And they uncovered all these newts, and they couldn't figure out, well, what are we going to do with all these? Well, what they did is they took them up to Barnes Bog because it's a nice depression. It has mud, which is exactly what they want. And so anyway, so.
Last name ends with B, so you got the bog, but
So
we know how important wetlands are, so that's okay.
Yeah. And part of that wetland, that's part of the Green Cove watershed.
Yep.
And Green Cove suffers from low flows in the summer months. So that's why it's so important to have wetlands, to have forests. So they say forest green, water's clean. And that's such a true statement, you know. So the more forestry that we can protect or restore, the more riparian buffers that we can protect or restore, not only here in Thurston County, the Deschutes is our biggest river, and we need to do a better job. And you know that there's a lot of sediment coming down, and just look at Capitol Lake.
Yeah.
It keeps filling up with sediment, so we need to slow that sediment load. We need to create storage places, wetlands, so that some of that can settle out. And then we just need to do a better job of storing those riparian buffers.
So Bob, before we finish up, I'd like to know, I know you're involved in a lot of projects right now, and they haven't stopped just because of a COVID-19. You've been working, and so why don't you tell us some of the other things you're involved in right now?
Right. One of the really fun things that we're doing is last year we started a native plant nursery at Marshall Middle School, working with Tom Condon and Matt Filippi, the two teachers there at Marshall. And the kids they're loving it. And so we have been growing native plants and then selling those native plants to another organization, the Ole Ecosystems, which is doing a restoration of West Bay Woods along West Bay Drive.
Right.
Yeah, right now they have upwards of 20 acres that they've preserved. And we're restoring a couple of properties, a 1 acre property right just north of Braun, right there by the West Bay Park.
And this is near where they have the blue heron
The blue heron
signage
rookery.
and Yorkery, yeah.
Right. And so the kids are growing those plants at the nursery, at the Marshall Nursery, and then doing restoration there at the West Bay Woods. So, and that's with Daniel Einstein and Ole Ecosystems, which is a wonderful organization here in Olympia. We're so lucky to have them, and doing the restoration and the preservation of green space, which is going to be so important to not only today, but future generations.
Thanks again for joining me today, Bob. It's been a great conversation. I hope to see you again soon. I know we'll be doing some tree planting quite soon with you.
Oh, yeah.
And thank you for all the work you do to help our Earth, and happy Earth Day.
It's a pleasure, and happy Earth Day to you.
Thanks, Bob.